All right, everyone. Hello. Welcome to my channel. My name is Thomas, and I do educational videos on many topics. Today is, I believe, the 88th, 89th video on the reciprocal system of theory. And this is a theory that was derived by Dewey B. Larson back in the 20th century. He had a few followers that updated the theory and improved upon it, in my opinion, after he died. He died back in 1990. And Dr. Bruce Perrett, Dr. KVK Nehru, Dr. Gopi Krishna have all made great contributions in the last 30 years. Perrett died back in 2020, I believe. And he did some great work as well. The reciprocal system is a theory of everything that I think is great because it puts, if you can learn the system and understand it, it puts control back into your hands. You don't have to depend upon a bunch of, um, you know, guys in white lab coats to tell you, what you're supposed to think about science, or even the guys in the frocks telling you what you're supposed to believe about religion. These things are in your own hands, but you need to be able to kind of have a blueprint to a system to figure it out. Now, the basic thrust of Larson's system is that the universe is not made out of matter. The universe is not made out of energy, but the universe is made out of motion. Motion is the relationship between space and time. Space and time are reciprocals of each other, just in the same way that 3/4 and 4/3 are reciprocals of each other. To get from one to the other, you have to invert them. And so therefore, time and space both have the same qualities. Time being progressing, flowing, and space, therefore, is also progressing or flowing. And we see evidence of that in the Hubble telescope's recession of the distant galaxies. And then also space is, we know, to be three-dimensional or more. And so too, time is also three or more dimensional. And time and space are both quantized, meaning that they come in only discrete units. There are no fractional units. You either have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units, or you don't have any. You have one, and then you have to wait to jump up to 2. You don't have 1.5 or 1.6 or anything like that. And exactly 1 unit of time, 1 unit of space in 1 unit of time is the speed of light. Speed of light is the null point or the midpoint or even the origin of the universe, where there is a half of the universe that is moving slower than the speed of light, which Larson calls sector 1, or the material sector. This is the sector we're familiar with. And then there is this other sector that Larson calls sector 2, or the cosmic sector, that is all moving faster than the speed of light. And this is an area of some mystery, but it doesn't have to be a mystery, because what's going on in sector 1 is exactly the same as what's going on in sector 2, except that time and space are inverted. So over here, you basically have space over time relationships. Over here, you basically have time over space relationships. Now, if you have a material sector, sector 1, it grows and aggregates by bonding, chemical bonding, up until its most complex level, which is DNA. A DNA molecule has billions of atoms. And at that level, the DNA becomes eligible to be controlled by a sector 2 unit. And that control, when you combine a sector 1 and sector 2 unit. That's what Larson calls the life unit. And the life unit is guided by survival. That is the control. The control is survival of the overall life unit. And the life unit starts from a single-celled organism, and it evolves or develops over time and over space, and up until its most complicated level, which Larson calls the intelligent human being. At that point, the intelligent human being becomes eligible to be controlled overall by a component from sector 3. Now, sector 3 is really, I believe, what we're calling the origin, or the speed of light itself, or as Larson says, because that's kind of my words, but as Larson says, it is the metaphysical region beyond space and time, or independent of space and time. And that unit is, the ancients probably would have called it God, or the gods, or the religious, or the spiritual. And Larson calls it sector 3. And sector 3 is where sector 2 is guided by survival. Sector 3 is guided by good behavior, or ethical behavior, or just goodness. And so the human being, the intelligent human being, upon the control of sector 3, is kind of in a position where those two things can work together, but they also can conflict. And in situations where they're conflicting, sector 2, survival, and sector 3, ethical behavior, the human being has to choose between the two. That's really the function of free will. So all of this is really the topic. The metaphysical region, this region beyond space and time, sector 3, is really the subject matter of Larson's final book that's called Beyond Space and Time. It came out after he died. Many of his adherents were embarrassed by it, because all of Larson's earlier books were on the hard sciences. But then he's delving into religion and philosophy and psychology, and they thought that these were just his private diary or whatever, and that his wife should have never released these after he died. But that's what happened, and so we're looking at this. Now, sector 3 communicates, according to Larson, with the human being by various methods. They're all really the same, but they have different context: ESP, intuition, religious revelation, scientific insight, visions. And these are things that these are ways that the human being is able to, glean what the sector 3 is communicating. Now, our ability to, those communications that we get from sector 3 are good, and they are always correct. But our ability to interpret them is a different matter, and we have to be prepared. We have to prepare ourselves to understand these messages. And that takes some doing. So right now, we're in this book, Beyond Space and Time. We're in chapter 22, which is called Humanism. And Larson just got done talking about the development of humanism, which is basically, some type of ethical understanding without the religion attached to it. And he was kind of saying that, that's a valid way to approach it, but you can't really leave behind the religious core of it. Many of the religions have this kind of veneer, or these appurtenances that are kind of irrelevant and not the religious. The various rituals and kind of the parade, the all the different, uh, kind of non-relevant parts of the religion. But Larson is kind of saying that the core of the religion needs to be maintained. Okay, so we're going to take over right here. This is Larson. The stock of religious ideas is generally offered as a divine revelation, but that is in itself a part of the religious system and entirely leaves out of account the known historical development of these ideas and their variation in different ages and cultures. Now, I believe that's a quote from Freud. What Freud himself, now this is back to Larson, what Freud himself failed to take into account is that the gradual development of religious ideas over a long period of history has no implication as to the means by which the advances were made. A cumulative series of revelations and other intuitive events leading ultimately to the doctrines of one of the modern religions is just as logical a development as the cumulative series of flashes of insight that culminated in one of the modern physical theories. A similar criticism can be made of his assertion that religious beliefs are illusions, fulfillments of the oldest, strongest, and most insistent wishes of mankind. The fact that most human beings would prefer that their religious beliefs be valid is not inconsistent with their validity. Actually, Freud conceded this point, referring to religious doctrines just as they cannot be proved, neither can they be refuted. And he explains that in calling religious ideas illusions, he's not implying that they are necessarily wrong, merely that wish fulfillment is a prominent factor in their motivation. And there's a quote from him saying, "When I say that they are illusions, I must define the meaning of the word. Illusion is not the same as error. It is indeed not necessarily an error." Freud's admission that the religious assertions may be valid, notwithstanding all that he has said against them, is only one of a number of items which indicate that, even though he took a firm anti-religious position in public, Freud was never fully able to convince himself that his position was sound. One other commentator said, "What is not clear is why Freud himself, as a natural atheist, should have been so deeply and illuminatingly interested in the psychology of religion." And Larson goes on quite a bit here at length, talking about how Freud's last book was about the life of Moses and his influence on the development of religious thought. And Freud could not avoid recognizing that there are aspects of human life which cannot be derived from experience. He then quotes a couple other philosophers who are discussing Freud. Now, here he says, "The inability to provide an empirical basis for ethical judgments pushes the strict empiricist into a corner where he is forced to contend that such judgments have no real significance." And now he's going over A.J. Ayer and his emotive theory of ethics, as it is called, has gained considerable support because superficially it seems to clear the way for a strictly empirical view of the subject. However, if we look more closely, it is evident that the empiricists have not carried their examination of this subject far enough. They have failed to examine and take into consideration the nature of emotion. As brought out in chapter 13, emotion is a process. For example, a message received through the senses indicates that the presence of one of a class of situations that experience has indicated to be dangerous. Evolution, a physical process, has conditioned the physical organism to respond to dangerous situations with the emotion of fear, and to respond to fear by flight. Thus, the fear emotion is not something independent of experience. Both the recognition of the dangerous situation and the recognition of flight as the appropriate response are grounded in experience. Either the individual's own experience, the experience of others that has been communicated to him, or the experiences of his ancestors, embodied in what we call instinct. The situation in ethics is no different. In the world of the empiricist, where experience is the only source of information, the ethical emotion, if any such thing exists, must be grounded in experience. Thus, the emotive theory accomplishes nothing. Since ethical principles cannot be obtained directly from experience, the empiricist brands them as emotional, but our analysis of emotions shows that they are simply processes which apply the results of experience to current problems. What the emotive theory is trying to do is to accomplish the impossible by doing it indirectly. Inability to account for the origin of ethical judgments by appeal to experience has simply been succeeded by an inability to account for the origin of ethical emotions. And then he talks about other humanists who have also recognized the weakness of this emotive theory. And says any commitment not grounded in experience or any possibility of a transcendental reality contradicts that first principle. Either there is a non-physical existence or there is not. The basic humanist position is therefore untenable, even on the basis of the situation that existed before this present work produced a scientific proof of the reality of metaphysical or transcendental existence. Regardless of the particular variation of the general humanist position on which the individual philosopher may take his stand, he cannot complete his argument without introducing something that contradicts his basic premise, some emotion, commitment, or the like that cannot be derived from that physical experience which, according to his fundamental premise, is the only source from which they could be derived. So Larson is just rejecting the humanists and stating flatly that there is a metaphysical existence, which is really the subject of this whole book. And so he's kind of going on and on here, figuring out what's wrong with humanism and, poking holes in their various different attempts to bring the transcendental or the metaphysical down to a matter of experience. Humanism is not, as it purports to be, at odds with the transcendental religions. The essentials of religion, we find, are metaphysical, and as most religions have always claimed, a purely secular system of thought, one which has been deliberately confined within the boundaries of the physical universe for whatever reason, therefore has no relevance to religious essentials. The accomplishments of humanism in the increasingly successful attack on the superstitious mythology of the organized religions have not affected the religious base in the least. On the contrary, they should be beneficial to religion, as this is the kind of a purging of the non-religious accretions from the fundamental religious principles that is needed in order to restore the credibility of the religious fundamentals in the eyes of those whose faith has been shaken by the continued retreat of the ecclesiastics when challenged by scientific discovery. So I think Larson is saying that, humanism should, when done correctly, should actually be a benefit to religion, in that it's kind of getting rid of the non-religious parts of that religion. Humanism has found strong support for its criticism of the tendency of organized religions to emphasize preparation for the other world. at the expense of human happiness in this one. But our analysis shows no reason why religion should see a conflict between the two. We found no factual support for asceticism, the joyless ethic, or any of the other doctrines of this kind to which the humanists object. Indeed, as we pointed out last chapter, our findings lead to the conclusion that the moral code requires the human individual to lead a pleasant, comfortable, and untroubled life to the extent that his circumstances permit, and requires him to assist others to do likewise, so far as this can be done without undue impairment of his own situation. Okay, so he's going back into the humanist philosophy. The ultimate goal is defined in metaphysical terms, to be sure, but the road to that goal lies entirely in human life. The ultimate goal is not in any way antagonistic to the humanistic objective of the good life. On the contrary, nothing is more likely to improve the rate of progress toward that good life than an increase in the number of individuals who want to do that which is morally right, which is what he's saying is characteristic of a level 3 individual. A person under the influence of sector 3 is somebody who wants to do what is morally right, is not a burden for that person to do what's right. It is what they want to do, which is quite different than a lot of the religious where they, say you have to sacrifice, you have to ablute, you have to do all these things that you don't want to do. Okay, we'll leave it there, and we will get back and finish Larson here tomorrow. Have a great day. We'll see you later.